Hey, it's Lynn Galadner, and this is the Make Meaning podcast. I'm founder of the Your People marketing and PR agency, and I lead the Make Meaning movement, a platform that helps purpose-driven visionaries and leaders do business with meaning. On this podcast, you'll hear stories of how people dare to take chances to live the life they want, with meaningful work and purposeful days. There are many ways to fill your life with meaning. Join us at makemeaning.org to learn more. Now, on to the show. In the early weeks of the coronavirus pandemic, Michael Ziman sat in his office and gazed at images on his computer of the Himalayan mountains. The images were taken from 100 miles away, a distance that for decades had appeared clouded by smog and pollution. With the world silenced and shut down, the air had cleared and the views extended for uninterrupted, glorious miles. This site brought an inspiration to Michael. He's a home builder focused on creating custom beach homes, and he had a revelation that he must reconcile his work with the very real impact of climate change. That led Michael to launch One Tree Pledge on Earth Day 2020, an effort to offset carbon emissions by planting trees on protected federal lands. He plants one tree for every square foot he builds, and since the launch, One Tree Pledge has planted nearly 100,000 trees already. Michael says he was just aligning his personal values with his business, and now he has a goal of planting 4 billion trees by 2030. He's also implementing carbon capture technologies in his work and using more sustainable materials like bamboo. Today, I welcome Michael to the Make Meaning podcast to talk about how you can transform the work you do to fit with your beliefs and values and make the world better in the process. So I love this story of how you decided to create One Tree Pledge. And I wonder if you could help me go back to those early moments and tell our listeners about how you were viewing the Himalayan mountains early in the pandemic. And that really inspired you to create this organization. So just take me through what happened for you.
So I think in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty going on in the world. And a lot of people had or were forced not to work and go into the office in quarantine, which really, for me, gave me time to evaluate my business, as well as spend a little bit more time reading, becoming aware of what's out there. I guess based on the news articles and stuff that I'm interested in, I think Google tends to send you, feeds that pique your interest.
Yeah.
So for me, I grew up out, loving the outdoors. And what really struck me is I got looped into this slideshow that was basically showing the Himalayan mountains being viewed from 300 miles away, which is a sight that hasn't been seen in my life. There were, pictures of cities all over China that had the bluest skies anyone's ever seen. It was being tagged and sent all around the internet. As you think about how this happened, you realize it's the lack of human activity, the lack of industry polluting the environment. And without that, you're really able to see blue skies, mountains, clean air. And it really made me think about all of the actions that people globally do, but more importantly, the actions that I take. I think I mentioned, I'm a builder. I build beach houses at the Jersey Shore, Long Beach Island. I do it because I love the outdoors. I love the beaches. I grew up going down there, and I wanted to share, or I wanted more people to have the same experiences I did on Long Beach Island, enjoying the natural environment. So as I started to do this led me on a path of doing a lot of research on climate change and the effects of human activity, the effects of different industries, and really raising my awareness of climate change and what we're ultimately doing to the planet, and how it's going to really adversely affect generations to come. And I decided right then and there that I didn't want to be a contributing factor. I wanted to be a benefit. I wanted my kids to enjoy the beaches. I wanted future generations that didn't create this problem to not have to deal with the effects of what we're all doing. So it was really an eye-opening experience, and having the time to process all of the images, the pictures, and the research that I was doing. And
Hmm.
I was just blown away. I would, prior to the pandemic, I wouldn't have called myself an environmentalist. After doing the research and seeing what we're doing, I realized I just could not be part of the problem and I needed to be part of the solution. The industry that I've chosen is really a great industry because we're creators. We're building things. That's my personal belief in what I do.
Hmm.
And I realized that I needed to align my business interests with my personal interests and be a benefactor to the environment.
I want to sort of go back to that moment about when you saw the clear skies, the view for hundreds of miles. Like, what were you feeling? I mean, it's not around the corner from you. Obviously, it's the other side of the world, but like how did that feel in that moment? Like, what thoughts or feelings did you have when you were like, "Oh my goodness, this is the first time in maybe a generation?" Like, was there fear or sadness or like disbelief? I mean, I know that when
It
I
was
heard about like the canals in Venice clearing enough for fish to be seen and to come back into them, and I've been to Venice and I was like, wow, that's monumental. So how did you feel when you saw all this?
I mean, it was really mixed emotions. At first, you feel great because you're seeing clean skies the same way you saw fish and polluted waters coming back. At first, you feel great. And then you start to think about, wow, we caused the problem of why there's not fish here. We
Yeah.
caused the pollution of why you can't see the mountains. So
Yeah.
it was really a bag of mixed emotions. You're happy and you're overjoyed with how beautiful nature is. But
Yeah.
then there's definitely a feeling of remorse that we caused this problem, people,
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah. So I want to talk about One Tree Pledge and we're going to get there. I'm going to ask you first like a challenging question and then we'll get to the fun stuff if you don't mind. But I
Sure.
was a journalist for a long time and I wrote a lot about home design, architecture and building. And I loved I was reporting and I was hearing stories and I was learning about sustainable materials and, how to create home designs that, fit into the landscape and maximizing our synergy with the natural world while we're, building new spaces. But I myself have only ever lived in older homes. Like I've never built one from the ground up. So I wanted to ask you, as a home builder who is concerned about climate change, how you reconcile that notion of building anew versus renovating or transforming existing homes. Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I primarily focus on new construction.
Okay.
And the reason in my little microcosm of the market is we are on a barrier island where I build, and we need to address the changing environment.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, where I am, the big thing people talk about is rising sea levels and how we cope with that for the long term.
Sure.
So a lot of the older homes, suffer from physical obsolescence
Mm-hmm.
where they can't quite, it's not the type of scenario where you could just go ahead and renovate it because it's a lot harder to hit certain codes. Also, nowadays, we're building with a lot more structural integrity
Mm-hmm.
to handle big storms and hurricanes.
Sure.
So for me, and wanting to be a good steward to our planet, I, took a deep dive into all the materials that go into our products or our finished homes,
Mm-hmm.
as well as trying to look at what the effect is from, I'll say electrifying our homes, but I
Sure.
really mean by heating, cooling, and using all the mechanical systems in the house.
Sure.
So the building industry has made minor strides in certain areas. Doing the research, we're able to pick out, what those areas are,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's building airtight houses that have minimal to no heat loss, which in turn greatly reduces your electric consumption to heat and cool the house.
Sure.
So there's a lot of advantages when you're building new, how to minimize basically the carbon impact of these structures.
Okay.
One of the big things that I started to look into was sourcing my materials as close to the job sites as possible.
Mm.
because one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases is moving materials around the world.
Okay.
And that's something that a lot of people don't pay it too much attention to.
Sure.
So what I try to do is really a combination of figuring out how to minimize the carbon impact on the materials that I source
Hmm.
using sustainable materials, as well as minimizing any type of carbon produced from the structures. And then I wanted to take it to another level and figure out how to help mitigate all the carbon that is a result of these processes.
So then you launched One Tree Pledge, right?
Exactly. So that's when I started to research different types of technologies that capture carbon
Okay.
versus just reducing your footprint. So through that process, carbon capture companies, which I'm still in discussions with, that are the technologies basically there that pulls carbon right out of the air
Hmm.
and stores it in various materials. So that's just on the verge of becoming economically feasible. But I realized the most cost effective and most efficient way is really what planet Earth's been doing for tens of millions or hundreds of millions of years, and
Hmm.
that's using trees and plants.
Hmm.
We all learned way back in the day that trees breathe in carbon dioxide for
Hmm.
photosynthesis,
Hmm.
and expel oxygen and clean air in what we breathe. So that was just like an aha moment. And
Hmm.
that further illustrates what's been going on with, back to the pictures in Venice and the Himalayan mountains, that
Sure.
once we seize some of the activities that are big pollutants, then we're really able to watch nature do its thing.
Yeah, it amazes me how nature heals itself so quickly and so well when we just step back. Like that was a big lesson for me at the beginning of the pandemic, that it was like it didn't take long for us to get out of the way and nature to say, we got this, like um but yeah, I want to hear a little bit about One Tree Pledge. So I know that you launched it on Earth Day 2020, 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So I'd love to know a little bit about, how it works, what your goals are. Yeah, tell me a little bit about it.
So, One Tree Pledge is something was something I was doing just for myself. Basically, what it was is a way to capture all of the carbon from our building activities and electrifying our homes.
Hmm.
So, I'm a builder, I'm not a horticulturist. So
Hmm.
I started to do my research and realized that there's several people doing this,
Hmm.
planting trees. But upon more and more research, I landed on American Forests, which is one of the oldest conservation organizations in the country.
Okay.
And what they do is they work with the federal government to reforest areas in our country and globally.
Hmm.
In our country, it tends to be on federally protected lands, and
Hmm.
they're not just going and planting one specimen of tree.
Hmm.
They're looking at the entire ecosystem, what trees work where and why they work better.
Okay.
For instance, in California, where there's a lot of forest fires, they're working to plant trees that are not as susceptible
Mm.
um, to
Mm.
heat and fires,
Sure.
as well as providing habitat for the whole ecosystem that goes on in the forest. So this organization brought a ton of experience and a ton of knowledge about what trees work, where they work, why they work, and the best practices and how to do it. And
Hmm.
then there's also follow up where they're studying the effects of the trees that they planted, and being in existence from the late 1800s, there's a lot of tried and true methods that work,
Hmm.
that they continue to put forth. So what I initially did is I audited probably about 20 of my homes by collecting all of my electric bills and natural gas bills, and then doing some crude calculations to figure out what the carbon emissions were.
Hmm.
So I definitely recognize that I'm building new houses and they're very airtight. I'm working with the highest Energy Star rated systems out there. Carbon that I'm emitting from my activities are probably a lot less than a comparable older home. So I was figuring on a higher end, my homes were emitting approximately 2 tons of carbon for
Hmm.
every 1,000 square feet,
Okay.
as a conservative average.
Hmm.
When you actually think about 2 tons, per thousand, a 4,000 square foot house is 8 tons. That's 16,000 pounds of carbon.
Okay.
um, which is a shitload, part of my language, but it's a lot.
Okay.
Um, so I wanted to figure out how to offset this. So I worked pretty closely with American Forest and the CEO, Jad Daly,
Hmm.
and helping me run calculations to help mitigate the carbon.
Hmm.
So taking, again, very conservative estimates, factoring in a die rate on the trees, we were conservatively estimating that each tree is going to sequester between 10 and 13 pounds of carbon every year over a 50-year life.
Okay.
So
So what
again,
does
we could
that mean
do,
in practical terms for planting trees? Like how many trees per house would that be?
so if I have a 4,000 square foot house that's putting out 8 tons of carbon every year,
Hmm.
that's 16,000 pounds. And I apologize, I'm just doing some quick math, because I'm trying to more than help mitigate it.
Uh-huh.
So in a 4,000 square foot house of a brand new construction that I would do, if I planted 1,600 trees,
Okay.
that would, in theory, help to mitigate 16,000 pounds of carbon a year.
Okay.
So I wanted to take, I like to be conservative. So I decided for my own projects that I'm going to be planting a minimum of 5,000 trees per project, or one tree per square foot.
Okay. And so you do
So
this, like you build a house for someone, you have a customer. Do you tell them about this? Do they end up contributing to it? Or is this sort of like you're giving back? I mean, how does that play out?
So when I first started and I first had the idea, this was, again, for my own benefit, to make me feel good and align my activities and my business.
Yeah.
So I just started doing it without telling anybody.
Okay.
And then I thought, maybe there's a message here.
Hmm.
The more clients I talk to about this, the more I realize that there's a growing awareness that's happening right now, where a lot of people are becoming a little bit more knowledgeable and aware about climate change, and they're looking for ways to get involved and looking for things that they could do, and
Hmm.
they're just not really sure what
Okay.
actions to take.
Okay.
So that's when I decided to make this a little bit more public and start talking about it, to show people how easy it is. And that's the goal, is to make this as easy as possible. Through a partnership with American Forest, we're putting the heavy lifting on them
Hmm.
to plant all the trees. And
Hmm.
they're able to do it at a very cost effective way of $1 per tree.
Wow.
So exactly, it was just like, aha.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
an aha moment. So then I tried to extrapolate this for other people. And I did a lot of research on average homes, average size of homes, average emissions, which it's all on our One Tree website. And there's a carbon math section,
Hmm.
and it tells you where we got the info from. But I
Okay.
realized that if everyone planted one tree
Hmm.
for each square foot of their home or apartment,
Hmm.
they would really help to mitigate all the greenhouse gases that come from using
Hmm.
these homes.
Well, that's great because I was going to ask you next how people can become more sustainable in their homes and offset their carbon production or emission. So that's a great way to do it. And they can do it through One Tree Pledge, or do you just send them directly to American Forest? How does that work?
They could do it any which way, but we made it very easy. If they go on One Tree Pledge, they could
Hmm.
read a little bit about the history.
Hmm.
There's a one-click button that says
Hmm.
plant trees,
Hmm.
and it's just a couple clicks of a button, and you can plant as many trees as you see fit and you can
Okay.
afford.
So, are there other things that listeners can do to become more sustainable in their homes? So, this is a great way, but is there anything in terms of, they already live in a home, they're not building it, but do you have any recommendations for how to be more carbon efficient?
There's a number. Every home is different, so you have to figure out where the large, I'll call it, leakage of greenhouse gases is coming from.
Hmm.
One of the interesting partnerships that we just formed was with a company called ResNet.
Okay.
Um, and ResNet is a company or an organization that has many people involved with it, that could go and figure out your heat loss calculations on your building envelope. And then
Okay.
they make recommendations on how to tighten the home to mitigate heat loss. And
Hmm.
I keep saying heat loss, but controlling the climate of your home is one of the biggest contributing factors. So if we're able to limit the heat loss, that's huge. Updating your appliances with higher Energy Star, more efficient appliances. One of the simple things is people's hot water heaters don't have that long of a life.
Hmm.
Replacing it with tankless hot water heaters,
Hmm.
um, greatly cuts down on the greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's electric or natural gas. Something as simple as putting in a smart thermostat. Everyone's heard of the Nest thermostat, and they
Uh-huh.
have some pretty interesting calculations that they
Hmm.
find that when people install the Nest thermostat, they're reducing their consumption by over 16%.
Wow. Okay.
So there's lots of little steps.
So I wanted to ask you, just to have a little bit of background, like how did you get into home building in the first place? Like what was that inspiration? Was it just because you grew up going to the shore, or was it something more than that?
Yeah, it was basically growing up, going down to the shore, spending my summers with my family on the beach,
Hmm.
and knowing that I wanted other people to be able to have the same happy memories and enjoying nature
Hmm.
that I did.
Yeah. Does it ever concern you now that you're so climate conscious? Like I remember when Superstorm Sandy happened, and I was talking to a friend about someone I know who lives on a coast and was really hit hard by it. And my friend said, "Well, we're really not supposed to live that close to the water, even though we love to." And I never thought about it, because like I'm a water girl. I love being by water, and so I just wonder when we hear all these scary projections and where our world is going to be in 50 years. Like I worry about that. Does it ever concern you, or are you really conscious of what you can do to protect that shore? What are your thoughts about that?
If we do nothing, the outlook for the future is going to be grim. But
Yeah.
if we start becoming aware and taking actions, our future could be very, very bright. And that's really what I want for my kids and future generations. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that they could enjoy the same beautiful beaches and the same environment and the same planet that I
Mhm.
enjoyed growing up.
Yeah, I love that. So, on this show, we talk a lot about how people make meaning in their lives and find purpose in their work. And so I wonder what advice you would offer our listeners to inspire them to go in search of their meaning and put it to work for them.
So I could tell you what works for me, and hopefully other people could extrapolate what would work for them.
Hmm.
Um, the one thing, that I kind of said that I started out was figuring out what's important to myself,
Hmm.
and what makes me happy. And my happiest times, honestly, are on the beach in the summertime with my family and friends,
Hmm.
enjoying the outdoors.
Hmm.
In the winter, it could be skiing on the mountains. But I am just a lover of outdoors.
Hmm.
And so I was saying, I'm a lover of all things outdoors.
Hmm.
And in my business, I somehow got lucky and fell into a situation where I'm able to create beautiful homes for people to enjoy the beaches and the outdoors, the same thing that makes me happy. I think that as you will start to align your interests with what makes you happy, then
Hmm.
things just start to click and the luck seems to get luckier and you tend to excel at
Hmm.
what you do. And as for me, as I continue to excel at what I do, I really get happy when I'm providing people with their dream homes.
Hmm.
And when I see them with family and friends and I bump into them and they tell me how happy they are and how much fun they're having. And sometimes it's about how beautiful their house is, but
Hmm.
it's really, a place for people to come down to appreciate the beaches
Hmm.
and have a beautiful home that's sustainable, that'll last for generations, that they could share with their family and friends. For me, happiness,
Hmm.
figuring out what makes you happy, figuring out what's important to you, and then trying to align all those interests, business, professional, personal, so they're in alignment. Things just start becoming successful, all your endeavors.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you. Well, Michael, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and we will make sure that in our show notes, everybody can find One Tree Pledge and learn about you. So thanks for being on the Make Meaning podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Make Meaning podcast with Lynn Galadner. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like what you've heard here, join us over at makemeaning.org to discover how you can add more meaning to your life. And hey, if you like our conversations, please subscribe and share this episode with the meaningful people in your world.